Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here,
And Blue Dragon 5.
and welcome to the 5th season of
Spielberg
Spielberg Month.
Month.
Since Steven Spielberg doesn't do audio commentary on his own work, we thought we'd do it for him. After all he's done for us, it's the least we could do for him. We've already gone over a couple of movies that we haven't seen yet and given them our fair shake, but it's time to get into another tribute. It's time to go a little bit. It's time to pay tribute to a man who was a longtime collaborator of Spielberg's, who we recently lost, but it's time to pay tribute to his life. So grab some baklava on the way to Munich and mount your Let's point the cameras towards the very eclectic collection of this year's Spielberg Month. Do 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 do. All right. I can feel Dragon's hatred just seething through the screen at me for changing the intro. Dragon, I was just like reading the intro in my head, and I was like, this is not going to play well with a tribute and what we have. Like, I know I should have gone over it with you beforehand. I know looks like a decision. I'm sorry. The real blunder was me saying fellow armchair Imagineers instead of fellow Amblemites. I made some boo-boos. I'm sorry. Can we move past this and stay friends, Dragon?
Maybe if you didn't call it out at the start of this thing, but let's just move on.
All right. So with us tonight is one of the co-founders of HotChocolateMedia.net, Mr. Jacob Gulliver.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
How you doing, Jacob?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been an interesting week getting through. I went and watched a ton of Allen Daviau's movies again, and have been excited to talk about this for a while. So
yeah, this is one of the big things that you wanted to collaborate on, because you've been working with us a ton, in the quarantine,
right?
And we appreciate having you on. So this is one of the first things you suggested, and of course we kind of tucked it away for Spielberg Month at the end here. And so Jacob, this is your baby, so I'm just going to go ahead and let you have free reign over this. Who is Allen Daviau, and why should we care? And also, Jacob, you also have a demonstration prepared of his cinematography style. So I'm just going to throw the screen over to you, my friend.
All right. So Allen Daviau is a longtime collaborator of Steven Spielberg. Since it's Spielberg Month, I thought this would be an appropriate thing to do. But he has done cinematography and a number of other minor roles on his movies over the years, and he actually worked on Steven's first short film, which is called Amblin, and is the original source of the name Amblin Entertainment. So they knew each other way back when, before Steven was a regular name. And
back when he was breaking into the Universal lot.
Yeah, 19-year-old Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. And I think, when I first got into the lighting side of film and the cinematography side of film, I was kind of clueless, and we watched a lot of videos, and our teachers at the college were pretty helpful in kind of identifying things. But in the interviews, we watched a ton of interviews with different cinematographers talking about their work. And Allen's always stuck with me because all the others had this a really intense idea of what is correct, and these are the things you have to do. And Allen just struck me as this really straightforward, down to earth guy. Just there aren't any rules. Just you have to make it look nice, and you have to listen to the other people around you to get it right. And that always stuck with me. And so when I heard he passed away, of course I was sad, but I think it's an opportunity to celebrate his life rather than mourn his death, and really showcase some of the cool stuff that he's done for cinema over the years. So I did kind of put together, and I sometimes try to do this for you guys, and I don't know, it's partially just for me, I guess, but I tried to put together some lighting that's connected to the thing we're doing. So I tried to
I
give
like
him,
this a lot, though. This is a great kind
Yeah.
of visual demonstration. Like, hypothetically, this should work out well for people who are like unfamiliar with him at a glance.
Yeah, so I tried to put together some lighting that's sort of emblematic of his styles. And he had two really signature styles. This is one of them. He used a ton of what's called edge lighting, which you can see here. You can see kind of like the hairs along my arm, and like the edge of my hair on one side is lit kind of like one step above silhouette to get that kind of a look. And then there's this real
Now, Gulliver,
soft
is
light coming from the other side.
that kind of Spielberg's like classic spotlight look? Is that where that comes from?
It could very well be.
Interesting.
It's interesting because this particular style was not popular for a long time. When they started making films, the style that was popular was the style of the films that were popular at the time, which were westerns. So everything is this kind of like in focus, bright, all directions lighting with a lot of lights or just sunlight doing the vast majority of the work, and that. That worked for Amblin, which is mostly that. But by the time that E.T. came around, this style was just not popular. Nobody was doing it. They thought it was too theatrical. But to hide some of the seams in the prosthetics and the wrinkles in the effects, this works perfectly. And it also does a good job of, keeping it kind of a little bit spooky, a little bit more, add a little tension to the scenes. And fog is also used heavily to do that. Allen Daviau's movies, there's a scene shooting through fog. It's in everything. He loved doing that just because it's such a pretty thing to do.
Yeah, the great Ridley Scott joke, like he and Spielberg run a contest to see who would have the most smoke in their movies.
Yeah. So it kind of came back into vogue for a while, and you see it a lot in, other movies in like the, early to mid 80s that edge lighting comes back. You see it in Back to the Future and basically anything that's like sci-fi oriented. It kind of goes out of vogue again, late 80s, early 90s. And then it comes back into vogue early 2000s. And everything is like super high contrast, and all the digital color correction is like way amped up because they finally have digital cinema that's somewhere close to the way film looks. So it's kind of this interesting history overall of how he's contributed, but this E.T. was kind of like a leaping off point for that style to come back into vogue. And I think one of the reasons that it stuck with us so much as a culture is because that style was fresh in a way. It wasn't something that felt like the other stuff that was being released. So that's kind of my little intro about the cinematography here. And I would love to jump to some of the films, if that's all right with you guys.
Now, one thing, Gulliver, just I want to talk when I think of this guy's style, just kind of going through the clips that you sent me. The one word that kept popping up for me was layers.
Sure.
This guy's got like he's got like he layers his shots. Like there's always like something in front of something or something like composed against something else.
Right.
And that's like a really interesting, because like you said, with westerns were very like kind of like well-rounded, like 360-degree shots and very cinematic. And this guy, he is incredibly cinematic, but I think theatrical is a better word for it. He kind of goes, it's interesting how he goes back to the tricks of theater and kind of implements them in film. That's a really fascinating kind of trick of the trade that he implements. Dragon, really quick, do you have any notes about his style in particular, just general thesis or anything?
A little bit of an impression on the man as a whole, doing some deep dives on him, like him doing his interviews and stuff, and just kind of talking about the medium. I mean, basically, my impression of Allen Daviau is, he's a cinematographer for the ages, most certainly. He seems like a really soft-spoken guy with kind of these great cinematic instincts. He apparently loved the presentation of film and television ever since he was a kid, when he got like a color TV in the 50s, that sort of stuff. Like, this guy's been around, and he always speaks about color within the filmmaking, the contrast, I suppose, and basically color of the smoke, the presentation is kind of capturing it really, really well. I mean, it's a shame that it's a real shame we lost him the way we did too. We lost him kind of the state of the world right now, which is just it sucks, man. But I mean, Daviau though he became a guy for the history books, and I loved seeing these kind of these long, strenuous interviews with him, where he's kind of passing down his knowledge and experience to the next generation in many respects. And I thought that was really, really neat. Seemed like a real gentleman of a guy. I liked him.
Yeah. There is another style that he was popular for, which is more of like what you see in kind of his like middle era work. So like Defending Your Life and Harry and the Hendersons, that kind of stuff, where he essentially is using cinematography to be almost as efficient as possible. And this was kind of when like studios were thinking about in like the late 80s, early 90s, we want to get a bunch of smaller stuff made and then hope that one of them blows up and becomes super big, which is something that doesn't happen as much these days. But at that time they were really just like, okay, we got to green light all this stuff and get it out there. But what that meant is that they were really careful about the amount of film that was being used and being developed. So Allen is particularly with Harry and the Hendersons, is using very limited amount of film to do a lot. And essentially he's putting as much information as he can in frames, sticking to what's called a oneer, shooting as much as possible in one take.
Oh yeah, we're well familiar with the oneer.
Conserve that film and keep the scene moving really efficiently. And there's some stuff that works really, really well there. There's a couple scenes that don't do that in Harry and the Hendersons that I'll get to later, but that kind of style worked really well. There's the Astronaut's Wife is another one from like late 90s, early 2000s that he did that uses that style a lot, and it's an awful film personally from my perspective, but they essentially just said shoot it efficiently and then we'll color correct it later.
That was a big thing for him, though, in the early years, like the Amblin and the E.T. years. He was doing a lot of commercial work, and also he was kind of building up kind of a reputation for being kind of fast and cheap in a good way, like what studios wanted. Like, okay, this guy works fast and cheap, and the reason for that is the guy made the smart calls. He just kind of let the things breathe, and he just kind of like, okay, well, let's, as you said, if we can do it all in one shot, it might be beneficial.
Yeah. Has very good instincts, I think, as a cinematographer, not just like the perfect eye of like every frame has to be perfect. It's also very efficient in terms of the footage that's getting passed over for the editors, thinking about how is this going to look next to these 6 other shots, and what is the possibility going to be for how this plays as part of the film. So I think that's something that is you don't really think about most of the time when you're watching a movie, but if you go into the way that he handles it, I think you can really see it there.
All right. So Gulliver, you're in charge, buddy. Take the lead in wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I'll jump into the initial films here. I think we should talk about E.T. first, because I feel like that's the film that you guys are most excited about, and that's the film that I think most of your channel is going to be really excited about. So if they came, they've sat through our little film discussion about Allen. Let's talk about E.T. And then we can kind of go through the rest of his movies and talk a little bit more about his style. And so for me, E.T. is like it has all the like emblems of what most people consider a true classic, not a cult classic, a true classic, in the sense that it has a family element. There's some elements of a threat to that family element, and then there's some unusual element that's brought in. In some cases, that's like, in this case, it's an alien, but in some cases, it's like, new marriage, or it's we're going on a camping trip or whatever it is. But like all those things kind of lend themselves to something that almost everybody can enjoy and watch on repeat. But beyond that, It's also really clever about the use of effects. It was really revolutionary for the time in terms of the visual quality for something in its budget range. And of course, you had stuff like Star Wars and Star Trek that were more powerful, for lack of a better word, effects. But I think E.T. in the budget range that it was much more sharp. And Spielberg had a few effects films under his belt already by that time, but I think it was the one where people said, yes, this Spielberg guy, we're going to follow him forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Gulliver, I was taught the 3-act structure in sophomore year through E.T., and I'll never forget that. Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, I kind of knew beginning, middle, and end, but but my filmmaking teacher, he really pinpointed like the whole okay, Act 1 is the setup, Act 2 is establish trying to achieve the goal, and then ending on the low of lows, and he really got into the nitty gritty of it, and I feel like E.T. is a perfect movie to teach that with. It's a perfect blueprint.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. Dragon, did you have the same reaction to E.T.?
I mean, E.T. It's just there's something. It's kind of like what you said before. I like how we kind of start in kind of the old familiar places, and then we introduce. I think kind of something. It's interesting how Daviau he kind of builds something of a style as he goes on through things. I mean, I don't know, some of this might be sheerly coincidental, but then again, I think he builds such a reputation with E.T. we keep coming back to with this, where he shoots slice of life very well, and then we introduce the interesting element.
Mm-hmm.
And then the element kind of builds upon itself. So, once when E.T. enters the fray, and then we escalate things, we get into the hazmat crew of it all, and then of course we're flying in front of the moon. We're building kind of the big the big heart of the piece that goes full circle to Act 1 with the drop off of E.T. and the pickup, if you will. And something really interesting about Daviau is that I loved he had this philosophy of what do you want to avoid. It's almost like a negative space thing with art, if you will, where he's just kind of using okay, what can we take away from this? What do you want to avoid, and kind of dropping everything away and just kind of seeing what's going to end up being on the screen. So as you saw, he brings E.T. to life. We keep him in smoke and shadow. So once we figure out the color and everything, we hide the cables, we hide the wires, we hide the fact that he's essentially kind of like a hunk of dried Play-Doh, Play-Doh and chicken wire.
Yeah.
And the magic kind of emanates from that. It's kind of, he always talked about this relationship between light and drama, and I think it really the light, the atmosphere of E.T. is something that really astonishes.
I've always said that with E.T. it really astonishes me that essentially what Daviau does is he takes maybe 3 blocks of suburban towns. Cul-de-sac. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you, Dragon. He takes 3 blocks of cul-de-sac and turns it into a big childhood adventure. But the great thing about that is, if you're a kid and you do live near some woods, then you're damn right those woods are going to be an adventure. Mm-hmm. And E.T. to me is one of the consummate movies of childhood, where it's no matter how many times I watch it, I always get that kind of stirring, oh man, I really feel something bigger than myself is at play here.
Yeah. Also, rewatching E.T., I was surprised how much of the production design and cinematic style Stranger Things just wholesale jacked from.
They did.
I've never been into Stranger Things all that much. You want to know the truth?
I like Stranger Things.
I like it for what it is, but I acknowledge what it is.
Sure, yeah. But I just rewatching it. I was just man, this kid looks exactly like Dustin. One of the background kids looks exactly like Dustin.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Anyways.
The fact is, there's something innately special about E.T. and how it all came together and how it all kind of paid off. And that's also Spielberg on a budget, because he's kind of becoming infamous for going really over around that time too, I think.
He didn't have the budget to replace the guns with walkie-talkies quite yet.
Not at the time.
Saving Private Ryan, where all the guns have been replaced by walkie-talkies. Pulling a little South Park pool there. Anyways.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's jump to some of the other films here.
Yeah.
But wait, I'm sorry, Gulliver, real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
And we should just mention for posterity's sake, the E.T. ride. That's another thing too. The E.T. ride. I mean, it kind of aims to recapture all that magic that was kind of like the whole ride is based around taking away, like you're in kind of the shadows for a lot of it. When you're in the woods and like the cars are coming and like the piercing light of the
yeah,
headlights and everything. And then basically you're on the bikes and you're going past the moon and everything, kind of making your journey. But again, it's like kind of capturing.
And then the second half is an acid trip.
Well,
but let's not focus on the second half.
You see what I mean, though. The first
let's
part
focus
of the
on the first half before we get to E.T.'s weird mushroom planet.
Again, it's like we're kind of recapturing the magic through the whole less is more of it all. Where again, we're stripping away what the audience are seeing because they're feeling it's capturing what the cornerstones of the movie so well. Kind of recaptures the feel of it in your mind, I guess, when you're on the ride. So it's just really immersive.
Absolutely,
very much kind of in the spirit. I think what he kind of did there.
Especially that fly over the city that kind of culminates in the big cardboard cutout moon that you go past.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Gulliver, where we off to next?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump back to the beginning of their career together, Amblin, and kind of start there, and then kind of go in roughly chronological order.
Yeah, we're gonna Dunkirk this puppy.
Oh God, Dunkirk.
I'm not going to spend forever on everything. I'm mostly just going to talk about the things that,
I'm going to be honest with you. The copy of Amblin that you sent me was such rough quality, I couldn't really get through it.
Yeah. I mean, it is from 1968, and I'm sure the original copy is probably not in the best of shape. I'm guessing
when we do have to cover it for Spielberg month, I'll be sure to, give it a proper watch, but
sure. And it's, I'm sure the original was shot on either like 8 or 16 millimeter film, which can be tough to get to look good in an HD setting unless you have
right
high quality equipment to scan it. But it's also like it's not very interesting compared to the rest of Spielberg stuff, and they're basically like students at this point making this film. They there's an assignment in just about every film class beyond level 1, which is you need to tell a story without dialogue. And this film feels like their film doing that, because there's just nothing in there. It's just reaction shots and like they're visually telling the story through the whole thing. But it is very much in that style of the time. It's like a Western with like a little bit of a hippie vibe because it's about two hitchhikers.
Oh, there's definitely a hippie
hang
vibe.
Out, and then make out and get high, and it's very much a 60s film. But the cinematography is quite good, even though it's real low budget. There's still some moments that are real clean. There's some firelight scenes which are often like really overexposed, and like you can see just like their face is like too white to be white, and then their background is just gone. That's like the typical firelight scene in crappy movies, and he clearly did a good job with it here. They figured out how to do it right. It's tough to balance those, and maybe this is just film inside jokes, but that's, to me, that was enjoyable to see.
And it ends up being the rock that Spielberg built his church upon.
Right, yeah, and Amblin ends up becoming the whole, the name of the company, which is fascinating. Even though this film, like, as you said, like nobody's seen it, even people who are real big Spielberg fans. So yeah, I don't imagine you guys have tons to say about Amblin, but if you want to throw
not really. I'm sorry.
Kind of a hippie heyday for the most part.
Sure.
I do want to, like I said, I do very much intend on giving it, like, kind of looking at it under a microscope when we do eventually get to it on a proper Spielberg month.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on here. Harry and the Hendersons comes fairly close after E.T. This is that time when Hollywood producers are looking at E.T. and saying, like, what if we shift this like even more towards the family side and make it more like, ABC Family-esque.
Harry and the Hendersons is surreal to watch in retrospect, knowing the techniques, because it's like the same techniques are going on for E.T., just with ridiculous situations.
Right, and
there's no subtlety to it, there's no heft to it, but it's still the same general feel in terms of shot composition. It's really strange.
Right, yeah. And there are a lot of like copycat stuff that came out at that time, like Mac and Me and like
big time, yeah.
But the I feel like the end of the film has become kind of like this. It was almost like cultural meme in some ways, you know.
But it's nice though. It's a really nice ending.
Sure, it is. It is a nice ending. I'm not, you know, knocking it. I'm just saying like, that's what it's remembered for. But there are some like really nice moments of cinematography. And I sent Tiki the scene earlier at the dinner table where like they meet with the professor who spent his life studying Bigfoot, and he says there are no Bigfoot. And he's like really serious. I don't want you to waste your life. And Harry's just walking up behind him.
And they're all laughing.
Yeah, they're laughing at him. And he gets up and he's just like, oh, and then gives him a big hug. It's like,
and he falls through the floor.
Yeah. But there's two other cinematography moments that I want to mention from Harry and the Hendersons that are so good. The first is when Harry has entered the kitchen and John Lithgow is looking around with the flashlight. And it keeps like sputtering out, but we get these like moments of shadow on the wall, and he keeps looking, trying to find it, and then the flashlight falls and it spins, and we get these flashes of shadow, and it's like illuminating parts of the room. Holy crap! From a logistics perspective, that is really hard to pull off. So, kudos to them for doing that correctly and doing that well, because getting that kind of lighting right is hard.
But you know, speaking of lighting, it was really interesting. Is that in some ways, Daviau seems to be getting kind of typecast for his work in E.T. and it's a little type hired. I don't know if you'll call it. The point being, he's kind of getting like familiar settings. But the challenge of this one seems to be he can't use the usual trick of we can't obscure the special creature. We have we don't have that luxury here. Someone bring in Rick Baker. We got to doll this up a little bit.
Well, there's a lot of scenes in this where like Harry is kind of. It's either just his face that's in light, or he's like in the background of a scene and the lighting there is much dimmer so that they can kind of do that. Or it's just like they're showing him from like the ass side, so you can't really see the face and they're not, you know, getting too detailed into that.
To be fair, it's always hard to get a good shot of Bigfoot in many respects. So
right. Absolutely. But he is kind of, you know, he is kind of hired for his work with shooting, you know, creature effects and, you know, body suits and prosthetics and that kind of stuff, which you'll see again with Congo.
Yeah.
And with Twilight Zone, the movie, which we'll get to in a minute here.
Yeah.
But the other shot that I really love, because like there's this whole like vegetarian motif with Harry and the Hendersons.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like a function of the story.
Like the celery around the table and stuff.
Yeah. And there's a scene where he's looking in a neighbor's window and she's boiling some water and then she's lowering the chicken into it. And then he looks over and he sees the neighbor climbing into the hot tub and being lowered in. And he's just
I love that visual moment. Such a great visual gag.
Right. Yeah. But like nothing is said in that scene. Nobody says anything. But it's still like really great.
Oh, wonderfully conveyed. Like, okay, he's putting two and two together there. Chicken, hot water, old folks, hot water.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's very much like the E.T. on a budget, the, you know, extra saccharine family E.T. You know, where they really just like jump even farther into like hammer home the be nice to animals elements of E.T. So
I gotta say that Lithgow is the bomb in that movie, though. He's so good.
He is, yeah.
Lithgow is like the saving grace of everything he ever does.
Man, but he was. I mean, he had some really great scenes with Harry in that movie, man. Especially towards Act 3 is so fun, and Harry the Henderson's like it's like drama. You get your big ending, again, the big money shot that kind of gets brought forth to the kind of blending in effect, like all that. Oh, it's great.
So after Harry and the Hendersons, around the same time, we're getting Amazing Stories and Twilight Zone the movie. Twilight Zone the movie, I'll jump to first just because there's a John Lithgow connection. One of the two scenes one of the two segments that Allen was cinematographer for was the remake of the very famous episode that had William Shatner in it, where he's having a hard time with being on an airplane, and he looks out and sees a monster on the wing. In the movie version, John Lithgow plays that part. There's this great long shot of John Lithgow.
Oh yeah, classic stuff. Yeah,
where it's this very slow zoom, and it's like a little bit shaky to like add to the tension of him just like slowly freaking out and like trying to cope with it. You can see all of the emotion on his face as he's like trying to rationalize what's happening and like, no, it can't be real, and I'm just freaking out, and no, I'm not going to deal with the window. I'm going to look over here, and I'm going to look over here, and then finally just totally losing it. And then, all these frenetic low angle shots of the crowd trying to deal with him. So it's very like, it's very sharp work in terms of, quick visual storytelling, even if it's not the most like dramatic lighting or, perfect style, but the choices of what is done is really, really good. The other segment that he did is much more in that other style, the efficient style, but it's the one where the racist douchebag guy is mad that he got a job passed over, and then walks out of the bar after complaining about it to find that he is in Nazi Germany. And is being perceived.
I always forget that this one exists.
I think isn't that the John Landis one?
That could be. I don't know who the director is.
I could have sworn. I think that one's the one with like the very the whole Vic Morrow incident and everything.
Yeah, I always remember Terror at 20,000 Feet, and then I remember the one with Anthony. I forget exactly what it's called.
The one you mean the It's a Good Life, the one with
It's a Good Life. Yeah.
So that Joe Dante did that one here, and they have I could have sworn Daviau did the cinematography on that one too, because it's like like really intense lighting and everything. It's really, it's definitely
the one shot in there that I still remember that feels like a Daviau shot that haunted me as a child was the one shot of the sister where the mouth has disappeared.
Yeah.
Oh God!
Because there's a shot like that, then we get some really push stuff, which again is is using lighting in a very intense way. With like when they pull the rabbit out of the hat, this giant Joe Dante monster, and it's like this intense red light, and then we send the girl into the TV. It's like, it's horrifying stuff.
Yeah,
Looney Tunes with edge, if you will.
Yeah. So then let's jump to Amazing Stories here.
Sure.
So Spielberg was one of the first to try and do like the prestige TV show, like getting a higher budget for a TV show and really just like trying to attract high quality talent to it, because at that point, like everybody wanted TV shows. They weren't as like excited about, movies unless you were turning out an ET every time. Unfortunately, the show failed. I think the show's pretty good.
Well, they brought it back now recently.
Did Apple they really?
TV. Yeah, on Apple TV, it's like their new Amazing Stories, but I think Spielberg's still producing it. All I know is like Robert Forster's last one of his last performances is in that show. I really want to watch it, but Apple TV is being difficult.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to bootleg that one.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, folks.
Well, it's Apple TV's fault. They should make it more available. Anyway, let's not dwell on that. Go on.
Yeah, but he was cinematographer for the first episode, which is called Ghost Train.
Yeah.
And there's tons and tons of that edge lighting in this, and they're using a lot of visual tricks that are things that were used in earlier movies as well.
It does look very cinematic on the small screen. Again, I think that maybe if Spielberg in the producing capacity is like, okay, look, we gotta really sell people on the show, so we're going to really pull out all the stops on that first episode. Hopefully, we're going to be able to keep it going. Well, I can't speak to whether it kept it going after that point or not, but I'm assuming something trailed off.
Yeah, I think it was just too expensive, and the studios wanted something that was cheaper.
Entirely possible. Studios are fickle mistress, so.
Yeah, it's a lot cheaper to do a sitcom or to do, like a cop drama type thing. So that's what people seem to respond the most to, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, if it's if you got time, you can go watch it. It's Amazing Stories is free to watch on NBC's website, so pretty handy if you want to check it out. I do want to jump briefly to the color purple.
This is one of the few Spielberg movies that we have not gotten to yet on Spielberg Month.
Yeah, I won't dive into it too much because I'm sure you want to have a ton of discussion about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's obviously a movie that deals with a lot about structural racism, given that it is Juneteenth. I think it's important that we talk about that for at least a little bit.
Of course.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, I've seen clips of it in the Spielberg documentary they did, and it looked really impressive.
Yeah. The visual style is great. It's a lot more of the simplistic style, but they're using a lot of prime lenses on this film, which means that they're getting really sharp focus on specific things that are important, and the rest of the stuff is being pushed to the background and shoved out of focus. There's a number of scenes with like large crowds where your eye is drawn to specific spots, and that's really hard to do unless you're very careful about how to do it, which I think they've done a very good job with. And then the scenes that are outdoors, those ones I think they've done a very good job with both color and lenses telling the audience exactly what you're supposed to be paying attention to, and the rest of the environment is kind of being absorbed nicely around them. In terms of story, it's obviously an important story. It's a generational story. And I think it's a good watch. It's not always an easy watch. There's some tough parts, but it's important to acknowledge the pain behind the story, the emotion behind the story with that one.
It's no 1941 for sure.
Oh God.
Yeah.
That's one. Basically, Jacob, we're intimidated by the color purple because of specifically because of what you just said, all the all the hardships and everything. Like, because I mean, let's face it, Dragon and I, running joke, but it's true. We are the whitest men on the internet, so we want to pay the movie the respect it deserves, and we want to be culturally sensitive about it. So that's why it's that's why it's so intimidating. But then on the other side of the coin, you have 1941, which is intimidating for other reasons.
Yep. The shame of Spielberg. That one's gonna be interesting to get to.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. I mean, I don't feel like you should, feel afraid to jump in terms of, the content presented, but
I'm not afraid of the content, Gulliver. I'm afraid of the commentary.
Sure.
Wait, do you mean our commentary, or do you mean
yes? Yes, just yes.
God. I want to emphasize most of this fear is coming from him. For me, I thought it was more of an availability thing, but by all means.
Okay, let's jump ahead to Empire of the Sun.
Okay, here's
a good one
I've seen.
This is actually my favorite Spielberg movie.
It's also my coworker's favorite Spielberg movie.
And I think the color purple is a good comparison because they both address a big topic that is a painful one from a perspective that's one you don't typically expect. And that is something that I like. I really like Empire of the Sun just because it's the only World War II movie where I feel like it's not about the soldiers in any respect. And like they're present. There's like a few of them that are like minor characters, but it's really about people who, no matter what they do, have no influence on the outcome of the war. And every World War II movie is about this one person and how they influenced the course of the war.
Sure.
So I like this movie for that reason. There's tons and tons of visual storytelling in this movie. There's the prolonged sequence of the young Christian Bale crawling through dirt, and everybody's betting on whether he's going to live or not.
Yep.
He's out under the fence trying to catch a pheasant, and like there's the sequence where he's, he and his family have gone to a hotel because they're afraid of the soldiers that are rolling through their neighborhood. And the boats in the harbor are using signal lights back and forth. And he's like, "Oh, fun, signal lights." And he takes out his flashlight and is doing signals, and then their hotel gets bombed. Like, it's such a good way to tell how innocence looks in the face of something as awful as war.
Yeah, it's Spielberg's anti-Peter Pan movie. It's about the kid who has to grow up.
God damn it.
Right.
Gulliver, like Empire of the Sun does it a lot better, and it's a much more mature movie, but that's also what I liked about War Horse. Because War Horse shows the perspective of the war. Guess what, Gulliver? Guess what?
What?
Through a horse! But in all seriousness, it does it really well, and especially in terms of like the kind of the moral gray area that, if you're a horse, you don't know who's good, who's bad, so
yeah.
All right, anyways.
Any further thoughts on Empire of the Sun that you want to bring in?
I've always loved like the old the football stadium scene where basically have, like all the possessions and all the valuables. It's very evocative stuff, and of course leads to the famous Nagasaki bombing scene.
Right, when you see the iridescent light ripple through the sky, and
speaking of that light, I feel like there's a lot of cool like natural lighting tricks that he uses, which is a little bit opposite of how he started out with the very kind of theatrical lighting. But in this movie, correct me if I'm wrong, Gulliver, but in this movie, I mean, I'm sure there are theatrical lighting here and there in the movie, but a lot of it feels very natural.
Yeah, it does. The big theatrical sequence for me that stands out is the scene after he like gets separated from his parents in the crowd and goes back to the house. It's a montage sequence where there's no lines. He's just doing stuff around the house. And you can see he's running out of food and he's getting bored and he doesn't know what to do with himself. Even though there's no lines for, 3 or 4 minutes in that sequence. But each shot progressively gets darker and more stark in its contrast in that sequence. And by the end, there's that shot of him sitting alone at the dinner table, essentially silhouetted aside from the candle, which is giving him that kind of spill from the other side, at that huge dinner table in the dining room. It's when I rewatched it this week, I was just like, oh man, this is such a good shot. But yeah, if you want to see what Allen can do with some time and some money, this is that movie. E.T. is great, don't get me wrong, but if you want to see what Allen could really do with some time and money, it's Empire of the Sun.
And also look what they did towards the end of the movie. We kind of see the character's psychology within the frame, where we have Jimmy's in, like, I believe, like the deserted POW camp or something, or basically after the war is over. He's just kind of left alone. It's like after like horrible stuff has happened to him, and he's grown up way more than the kid should, and he kind of snaps, and he's just kind of like trying to hold on to his childhood as much as he can, just going around the deserted camp. And you see like the damaged psychology and kind of this everything just kind of strung about, like it's all coming to pieces. It's just it's cluttery, it's a mess. But again, it's like a kid's bedroom almost. It's like it's interesting.
Yeah. All right, so moving on, we're going to drop down considerably in cinematic value to Congo.
Oh boy.
Not even Bruce Campbell could save this one, kids.
Yeah, man. Not even Bruce Campbell could save it. Holy cow. So after Spielberg makes Jurassic Park,
this was painful for me too, because I remember being a big Jurassic Park fan who was like, "Oh my God, Michael Crichton!"
It's got good people in it too. That's the frustrating thing.
Yeah.
We got Ernie Hudson doing really good. We have
and the plot's not Jurassic Park. There's no dinosaurs in it, but hey, talking gorilla, that's cool.
Let me tell you the main thing I know about Congo. The main thing I love most about Congo. It's not even about the movie itself. I love the Freakazoid gag about Congo. It's so funny. Where they have a Freakazoid episode, you have Cosgrove, Roddy McStew, and Freakazoid, they go to a movie. Like, hey, Freakazoid, want to go to a movie? And they're playing Congo. Basically, we're not seeing I don't think we're seeing the movie, but basically what we're seeing are them, like, conversing amongst us. Like, Cosgrove just can't decipher what's a monkey and what's not a monkey. So that's a guy in a suit. Like, no, it's a monkey! Like, okay, no, that's... That's
gotta be a guy in a suit.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay, no, seriously, go on about Congo.
Well, I was just gonna say, in terms of like the history of the movie, at this point, after Jurassic Park comes out, suddenly Michael Crichton has like 8,000 offers to make his other less good books into movies. one of which happened to be Congo, but there's also like
1 year later on HBO.
Yeah, like what was the one? There's another one that came out with the one with Sean Connery and Wesley Snipes. That was another one of his books. Disclosure, I think it was called. Rising Sun.
Timeline.
Is it Rising Sun?
Yeah, Rising Sun's the Connery one you're thinking
Disclosure
of. Yeah.
is one. The one about the messy business ethics case one. Anyway, so all of his books get like immediate deals for right after that. And this happened to be one of them. They figured, okay, well, Allen Daviau's done creature stuff. He's worked with Spielberg. He's going to bring what we need to this movie. Unfortunately, the rest of the production is a train wreck.
It was better than a canon movie with a monkey.
Yeah,
far better than a canon movie.
What I will say about this movie is that its portrayal of like tech, in particular cameras, is way better than most other movies. And I don't know anything about that particular production design element, but I like to think that Allen helps them not suck at that. But in terms of the rest of the plot and the weirdness of the characters and like the weird racist stereotypes and stuff, like it's basically unwatchable. Basically the only good thing is the monkey drinking the olive martini. Like that's the only good part. Yeah.
But here's the question.
Amy wants green drink. Amy wants.
Is it a guy in a suit though? That's my question.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a fun idea though. The fact that you give them these, it's like on paper it seems like it might go somewhere. It's like let's give her what if we communicate the sign language to the audience, like a little speaker in the glove. So I kind of get it, but it doesn't play right.
Yeah. So let's leave the pain of Congo behind us and move on here. So the next movie, actually, you asked me to put on this list. I haven't seen it, but I've watched a few clips, and it does seem to exhibit some of the Daviau tricks of the trade. Defending Your Life, which is it seems about a man who dies and has to kind of justify whether or not he gets to go to the afterlife, as it were. Am I correct in that, Dragon?
Yes, you are absolutely correct in that. Basically, it's kind of a one of two things. He's not going down south or anything, folks. He's all good there. It's the question of is he going to get reincarnated as like a different person, basically another stab at kind of living a life and going upstairs, or is he just going to go upstairs? So basically, it's kind of in this. It's not. I mean,
so it's an all dogs go to heaven.
Well, I mean, he's not really. He doesn't get sent down there, Tiki. He's just reevaluated. Remember? Okay, do you ever?
No, I know, but the general rule with all dogs go to heaven before they literally do have a hell, which I don't understand that. But,
well, you see, this is why you were muddying things with the all dogs. This is why I was trying to walk the all dogs.
But I'm saying the struggle with all dogs is, he's like heaven is for the dogs, but then he gets sent back. Anyways, you're right. I am muddying the waters. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, my point is the best comparison I have for it is, again, this movie has been parodied many times, especially in animation. If you remember Fairly Odd Parents, where Timmy Turner's kind of called out for being really crappy to the Cosmo and Wanda way back when Fairly Odd Parents was good in the early seasons.
Fairly Odd Parents was good.
Well, that's.
I remember that show existed.
Okay. My point is pretty straightforward. Basically, you're showing a person the clips of their life, and basically we're equating, if they spent their life as best they could. So Albert Brooks, he directed and wrote this thing, and it says one of the Albert Brooks. I love Albert Brooks movies, and I think this might be my favorite, if not the best one of the bunch.
Albert Brooks also a fantastic Simpsons guest star.
That is true as well. That's what I'm saying. This is basically, I think, kind of the Daviau of it all is like we have. It's very grounded in the familiar. Basically, instead of like a purgatory, I mean, you kind of call it purgatory, but again, it's a really nice place. And it's like you imagine if you're in town for like you're in a town for like the best vacation ever. He's there for like 8 days essentially, and each day they're reviewing your life, and it's called Judgment City, and it's like the most idyllic heaven-like place. But again, it's not like fluffy clouds and everything. You're just like a really nice vacation spot. It's very grand, it's kind of the ground in the familiar. The climax, it's something really special. Where again, it's kind of like it's as pared down as you can get, but it's still it feels intense because you have like there's this tram thing where it's like again like is he going to get from point A to point B? But again, it's like it feels like really easily shot in a sense, but again like you feel the drama though. It's like there's something really. It's basically, I think the movie overall kind of punctuates the emotional headspace really well, especially in the scenes where he's in front of the tribunal, basically a bunch of judges who are pulling up the clips of his life. And basically you kind of flash back to these really interesting points in a man's life that I think we all can relate to, like these relatable and familiar like decisions you make in everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And basically that's kind of where the cinematography really kind of pops because you're really in the character's head as you're kind of watching the kind of the difference and error in the character's life kind of brought about in an isolated scene. And again, none of them are really alike. They're all like different, kind of like one is him like as a baby, one's him as like as a man, and like all sorts of it's good stuff.
Yeah, I think you think you're on the money there with what I've seen. As I said, I haven't watched the movie, but I will.
I'd recommend
check it out one of these days. Yeah. What I saw, there's the scenes where they're like in the courtroom kind of area. We're getting some more of that edge lighting that he's kind of famous for, as well as like this almost like a spotlighting effect in the middle that I really enjoyed. So it's kind of like a little bit more dramatic than you'd expect for like a regular courtroom, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was it was nice from what I saw.
Yeah.
So let's jump ahead. In chronological order, he does a number of music videos next, but I might save those for the end, just since we're kind of on a run with the films here. So I would like to talk about Van Helsing.
Okay.
I know Tiki is excited about this one. I'm excited about this one too, to be honest.
This one I remember being so excited for when it came out. I feel like I was a good age for it. I was a literary nerd, so I was like, oh my god, like an action movie with like fucking Frankenstein and the Wolfman? Are you kidding me? Hell yes, sign me up.
Yeah.
And then
starring Wolverine.
Right, yeah. Exactly. And then all I remember about the movie is just it going on too long.
Yeah, that's basically the movie's biggest problem, is that it's clearly a 90-minute movie in a 130-minute movie's body.
Yeah, big time. I mean, it's not a terrible movie. There's a lot of redeeming elements about it. The cinematography, probably first and foremost.
Yeah, I mean the whole movie is sold on this visual style, and it even starts out with like the black and white, Frankenstein myth. They do kind of that retelling of the Frankenstein myth in this black and white style, and it's clearly this love letter to the early Universal monster films with Frankenstein and Dracula, and
I just wish it was plotted as smartly as those movies were.
Right. Yeah. But I think Allen Daviau's edge lighting style is like super amplified here. They like crank it up way up with the early 2000s digital cinema color correction, and that specific style. It kind of rides. It keeps the movie seeming cool even when the storytelling gets dumb. So,
by the way, Gulliver, can you imagine? Let's see, another movie that came out around this time. That poor Tiki, who was a literary nerd and an action movie junkie, and saw the premise. And I was like, ooh, a bunch of literary icons getting together for a big adventure.
I think you're referring to LXG,
Yes.
The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which honestly, Gulliver, I kind of have some ironic enjoyment factor.
Oh,
of.
absolutely. That's a guilty pleasure for me.
Totally.
It's total trash from beginning to end. But it's like, you know, the crappiest
has
candy.
Decent ideas in it. Like I really like the idea of Tom Sawyer being like an FBI agent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean that one's a little bit like it's based on the Alan Moore comic book. Of the
You can
same
imagine
name.
how thrilled he was with
It's
that.
very different. Yeah, nothing
I
that
feel
he's
like
ever
that's the
created has
movie
been
that
made into a
killed
movie
Alan
that he
Moore's.
enjoyed. Yeah,
that's the movie that killed Alan Moore's relationship with Hollywood, I think.
I mean, if he can't get behind the Snyder Watchmen, I mean, can you imagine how he'd fare with
God.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
yeah. There's a famous Neil Gaiman quote about being at a dinner with Alan Moore, and Alan Moore is explaining, like he's talking about crafting this like really grim scene in From Hell, and he said, and Neil turns to him and he says, "Alan, I love you, but shut up, I'm eating."
Oh god.
So anyway, but yeah, I mean, there's so many great visual tricks in Van Helsing with, like, you know, the vampire, like the Dracula characters like walking along and then starts walking up the wall, and like there's great shots with, like, you know, playing with, you know, which way is up, and there's the shots where like the vampire brides are swooping in. There's these awesome like Dutch angle twisting shots in that sequence. There's the scenes with like the dancing, and like the acrobats are spinning up above, like the masquerade party, and then when she looks over at the mirror, there's like nobody there except for her. Like all those great like visual tricks. I mean, I feel like are underappreciated work that's being done there, even if the script isn't 100% perfect. I feel like Alan is really putting in the masterclass work on this film.
Sure, definitely.
And I don't want that to go unappreciated, even if the film is schlocky.
It's very schlocky, but it looks pretty. It looks very pretty.
It looks really pretty, and there's some really, really nice stuff in this.
Yeah.
So that was the one I kind of wanted to end on. That was his last big feature. I do want to briefly jump into music videos, if that's
okay. Go ahead. Sure.
With you. There's two that he's kind of very, very publicly attached to in some ways. One of them is Judith by Perfect Circle. It's a performance music video, so it's not all that interesting in terms of like storytelling, but it
does have the lighting you were talking about, though.
Yes, he was specifically chosen because the studio said, we want to do a performance video, and the band said, okay, but we don't want our faces in it. So he's doing these like really intense silhouettes of everybody with like the harsh edge lighting, so you just kind of get a sense that they're there. And I think that kind of like dark style really fits with the music.
It does, yeah.
But at its core, it's kind of a standard performance music video. There's not much going on beyond just
it reminds me of a Nirvana music video or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, those like really sharp primes from like the early 2000s style, where like you have one specific thing in focus and everything else is just dropped away. Good stuff. The other one I want to mention is Meatloaf. Objects in the rearview mirror may be closer than they appear. He did a couple Meatloaf videos, but this one I think is good to mention just because it's a storytelling video. There's the two kids in the video, one of which is presumably Meatloaf, who like planes and stuff, and then one of them like steals their dad's plane and then dies in a plane crash. And then like the dad turns to drinking and like beats the kid. But I mean, Meatloaf is telling the story, but he's not exactly spelling it out. The visuals are doing the vast majority of the work, and the production value on this music video is huge. It's way more cinematic than most music videos tend to be. It's not really a performance video at all. It's almost entirely storytelling. You just occasionally get Meatloaf like wandering through a scene in his trench coat, You know,
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the music videos that Green Day did for American Idiot, where it was kind of performance, but at the same time, it was very narrative driven as well.
Yeah, I would say that this video is prettier than those.
Oh no, I won't deny that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying it's still
the style.
It's still got the same kind of idea of like kind of the very narrative driven music video.
Sure.
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen either of those videos, if anybody watching is wanting a very quick primer on like what to expect from Allen Daviau, I think those are both good ways to do it because they're both under 10 minutes. Anybody's got time for 10 minutes to go watch something.
Yeah.
I'm kind of just forget everything except for what is visually being presented and see what you learn from that. I think both of those are really good, kind of quick primer in the Allen Daviau school of cinematography.
All right.
Were there any other films or TV or music videos or anything that I missed that you guys want to talk about?
Well, I got one thing real briefly, though, not a lot on, just to kind of acknowledge it. He did. Apparently, he did the Tigger movie.
Interesting.
Did he really?
Yeah, apparently. So I guess, the main thing I wanted to bring up about it is it's kind of like interesting seeing him because it was always about, I believe he's asked many times about kind of the future of cinematography and kind of digital versus the actual film and all that sort of stuff. And with the Tigger movie, it's kind of interesting seeing him kind of branch out into kind of the new forms of cinematography and cinematography, not in the kind of conventional kind of practical nature. I'm sure he kind of grew accustomed to. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I will admit I'm not super familiar with it, but I remember when it came out. And
I saw it once. I can't remember much of it myself. I just remember, it may have had kind of a decent production values, but it's been years, so I can't really speak too much to it.
Sure.
Big snow sequence.
The framing was on point if Allen was their director of photography.
It's kind of neat to see they dabbled in animation. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And what that usually means in terms of animation, if you're a director of photography, is like you're looking at the storyboards before anybody else and saying, no, fix this before this goes over to our animators.
Yeah.
So, and then of course you have final say in terms of like this visual's in, this visual's out. But in terms of like lighting, not really a thing. You're kind of looking at it from a perspective of like, what's the style I'm given? Here's how I can frame this. Here's how I can tell this story. And then, passing the information over to your storyboard artists. So it is a different beast for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So, Dragon, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So I guess in kind of summation, the man, if we learn anything from Allen Daviau, the man knew how to make a shot iconic and kind of help make a film come together. It's like he represented kind of one of the many elements that contributes to a film being rewatched and enjoyed for years to come. If we can take anything away from the man outside, the man just was really good at his job. It's that the man kind of contributed to kind of some huge kind of cinematic marvels. Again, even E.T. aside, E.T. of course, again, Amblin got a name and a logo in part from the man, in part making it pop and helping it come together. And but again, he has some excellent films under his belt as well, such as again, like Empire of the Sun being kind of a big one, kind of for the for the catalog to impress for sure. Of course, no one's going to turn their nose up at the Twilight Zone. You have kind of the people pleaser with Harry and the Hendersons, and you got. Of course, you're defending your life for the Albert Brooks crowd. So there's a lot to love about what Daviau did, and again, seemed like such a pleasant and intuitive guy about cinematography.
Just look at this guy's smile. We've had this image up the whole podcast, but seriously, this is such a good image to kind of like represent someone who. This is a guy who loves what he does for a living.
He loved the nitty gritty because he would go on about about coloring and lighting and the whole 9 yards. The man was a titan.
Yeah, and if you look at like some of the personalities that come out of Hollywood, like you have like the big swinging dick filmmakers like Michael Bay, and you have the more like, oh, I'm the rough and tumble dialogue guy like Quentin Tarantino is, but like this is a guy like he's not famous in the way they are because he doesn't have that personality.
He's not boisterous.
He's not boisterous. He's not loud. He's just like a dude who's really good at listening and following through on what's been given in the best, most efficient way possible. And I think that's something that's really underappreciated in Hollywood. Everybody is looking for that, huge personality, wacky guy. He reminds me of like a Robert Rodriguez type where like they're so soft spoken and sweet and they just like, churn out, cool stuff after cool stuff. Of course, Allen is one generation older than Robert Rodriguez, but it's that same kind of like personality that I love seeing in Hollywood because they're not a problematic douchebag and they're turning out good stuff pretty consistently.
Yeah.
All right, Gulliver, is that pretty much your last word?
Yeah, I would say so. Just if anybody's watching who hasn't checked out Allen, please go check out Allen. And obviously our sympathies to the family. Know that we love Allen. We appreciate his work so much. As people who dedicate large portions of our lives to consuming and talking about content that's out there. This is somebody that we hold dearly. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Allen, for everything.
All right, and thank you, Jacob Gulliver, for being on. Would you like to take a moment to plug anything?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm part of Hot Chocolate Media. We are an independent collective based in Minnesota. We do have collaborators elsewhere as well. We produce all kinds of fun web content that's available for free, including 2 web series. We also have a couple of podcasts. We do theater locally here in Minnesota. And we are currently in the process of trying to expand our network even more.
Nice.
So, yeah.
All right, and Gulliver will be on with me for a couple other podcasts this month for Summer Weens. We'll be talking some Gravity Falls. We will be talking some 8-Legged Freaks as soon as I figure out how to upload that thing. Gulliver, I've ran into some issues with that. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay.
It should be a good time. All right, folks. Well, that'll do it. This is the finale of this year's Spielberg month, but rest assured, next year, I think we'll try to get, a more solid, concrete lineup of films for you guys. So stay tuned until next year as we tackle more subjects in the grim, gritty, wondrous, and whimsical world of Steven Spielberg on yet another thrilling installment of Spielberg Month.